Okay, Camp, Gurdon. I know that you guys are getting older, so I think it's time I have a conversation with you. And
Are we planning our funerals?
No.
I was saying more towards like when a mom and a dad love each other very much.
Oh, okay.
We're going to talk about the birds and the bees. What do you guys know about the birds and the bees?
Well, the bees are gay according to Minecraft. I do know that much.
What about the birds?
Well, the Blue Jays are a pretty good sports team here in Toronto. Those are birds.
Blue Jays are also asshole birds.
Are they actually? I don't know anything about Blue Jays.
They are very mean and territorial,
no.
yes.
Yes. Just like the Toronto Blue Jays. Nobody can beat them.
Well, that's why a Blue Jay is a good
good.
that's why a Blue Jay is a good sports mascot, because they're very aggressive.
There we go.
Oh, true.
Yeah.
The episode today is about the Toronto Blue Jays.
It
Oh,
is
please
not.
no.
It is
Please
not.
no. I don't.
Do you guys know why they call the birds and the bees the birds and the bees?
I actually don't.
Is it something to do with like boobies or something like that?
No, it is none of that. And with that, hello and welcome to the How Could You Forget podcast. Today, I'm going to be your host, Lexi, joined by my fellow hosts, Gurdon and Camp, and we are going to be talking about the birds and the bees, but more so as it relates to sex education, because for some reason, they use the term birds and bees to talk about reproduction, which I guess kind of makes sense when you look into it, but on the surface, I was always like, what does this have to do with anything?
It's just like any good idiom, where it's like, you hear it and you're like, why does this mean this? What?
Right.
But also, I'm kind of surprised we haven't had an episode on like sex ed earlier, considering didn't you like go to school for that sort of thing?
I wanted to. Yep.
I love the idea of camp stopping. Didn't you like go to school? Just
Didn't you go to school? Didn't you book
Did you go to school? What's it like? I don't know. I never found out.
Exactly.
Yeah, so, and I also forgot to mention, the How Could You Forget podcast is a podcast where we talk about things that maybe you've never heard of or are simply too good to forget. There we go.
Could you forget
Finish
the intro?
How could you forget
Perfect.
the intro? I do
now
every
the
time.
intro music. It's perfect.
Fun fact before we get into some more fun facts, that actually the meaning of the birds and the bees is to kind of simplify sexual reproduction, because I guess, bees carry the pollen and then they deposit it into the flower, which is kind of a, euphemism or I don't know. They say it's a colloquial expression. I don't really know what that means. I'm going to be honest with you.
I don't really know. I think colloquial is like when like something isn't necessarily like the right word, but it's culturally agreed upon that when you say this, it means this. Education!
Isn't colloquial like the 1700s whenever we came to America and stuff? Ain't that like colloquial?
Oh, yeah, the 13 colloquials. Yeah. So it says colloquial is used in ordinary or familiar conversation, meaning not formal or literary. Quote, colloquial in everyday language. A synonym is also informal.
Oh, so it's kind of just how women be talking.
True.
Yes.
People do be talking.
Only women can use.
I mean, I guess men do talk
Also,
too,
I
but,
think it's really dumb that we have to use like a birds and bees reference when we, to talk about certain things. It's funny when you think about it, but the people who actually are like, okay, I'm going to use this as a way to explain, like, bro, just say the word uterus, like just say the word sperm. If you can't say those words, I don't know. I don't know how
The average
person
doesn't know what a uterus is, okay? Let's just be real, okay?
I believe that. I actually believe that.
Unfortunately, I could imagine that. It's like, please, just don't. No more metaphors, anything like that. Just please tell me what a uterus is. That's all I want to know.
I just want to know the mysterious
Camp is like,
box.
I need to know what's
Where's the mysterious ticking noise coming from?
I've been looking forever. I can't find it.
I have a quiz.
I have a quiz. Oh my gosh.
Oh my
Okay.
God. Pop quiz.
So anyway, yeah. Today we're going to be talking about the state of sex ed in the United States.
Hey, Lexi. If somebody draws an anime version of a uterus, what would they call it?
A cuterus. I don't know.
Cuterus, yes.
Anyway,
Thank you. All right, moving on.
Wow, that's so original. Thank you for throwing me off there.
You're welcome.
I was trying to go down in like the kawaii route, like it's a kawaii uterus, but not
kawaii uterus.
Whoa.
Uterus-Chan. Okay, anyways.
How could you forget Uterus-Chan is the name of the episode?
No,
perfect.
We're like 5 minutes in, dude.
Okay.
Oh my goodness. So anyway, Uterus-Chan. I'm going to be talking about the state of sex education in the United States, and I have titled this basically the non-United States of sexual education because that's kind of the theme of today. So what kind of brought this up was that I was actually at work a couple weeks ago and I was talking with my coworkers, and they all went to different schools and like lived in different places than I did. So we were talking about like, oh, what was sex education like for you in school and all this stuff. And I had my one coworker be like, oh, do they even do abstinence only education anymore? And I was like, yeah. And he's like, are you serious? I'm like, yes, I'm serious. So this kind of led me down a rabbit hole of trying to figure out what sex ed was like in the United States, because it's so different based on every state, based on even every school district. This also coincides with the fact that there have been recent reports about the number of teen pregnancies actually dropping quite a bit, which that is a very positive thing. I want to highlight that. Less teen pregnancy is a positive thing across the board. But this is not just one statistic that is like, oh, okay, well, teen pregnancy is down, so abstinence only education, it's a winner. It totally works, because as we know, the rates of SA and STIs remain very high, and obviously there's something that needs to be done about that and education around those topics. So ultimately, a lot of school programs have the goal of teaching abstinence as a way to prevent these teen pregnancies, but that's not really the only metric worth measuring for those programs. So I wanted to look into that a little bit more today, and that's what we will be doing. So just a quick little disclaimer. If you couldn't tell by this point, we are going to be discussing sexual topics. However, nothing is going to be very explicit or graphic. I'm not aiming to make anybody uncomfortable. I'm very passionate about this topic, as Camp mentioned. I highly considered becoming a sex educator or sex therapist, but then I realized I live in the United States, so where am I going to find a job doing that? So I didn't, but I'm still very passionate about it, and I wish that I could be doing something in my life with it, but alas. So, like I say in most episodes, I grew up in America. I live in America, so that's where we're going to be talking about. But I would love to know the listeners' experiences with sex education, no matter where you grew up. You're from a different country. I would love to hear what you were taught or not taught, and kind of what that looked like for you. So, that's my disclaimer.
What were your
birds and bees? Was it fish and trees? Who knows? One fish, two fish, red fish, blue fish. Anyway. Like I mentioned earlier, I was inspired to discuss this topic with you two this week because of the question that my coworker asked, and I was actually stunned that he even asked that. I was like, oh, you're shitting me, right? Like you're trying to, and he's like, no, like, do they still do that? I'm like, wow, okay. It led me to finding this map of sex education in the United States, and these are the state rankings for abstinence only education and what these states mandate. So I'll put this link here, and we can put a little graphic on screen if you're watching the video version. But basically all you need to know is it's just a map where you can click and you can see, is sex ed mandatory and what sorts of things it covers.
Bro, this does not look like the U.S. What on earth?
I mean, it's
kind of...
It's just hexagons.
I know, I'm just messing with you.
Or is it octagons? It's a hexagon.
No, those are hex.
Hexagons are the best hexagons.
Yeah. So, by looking at this map, basically you can see that sex education is mandatory in 30 of the 50 states in the United States. And honestly, you would think that's a pretty good amount, right? That's over half. But not all of these mandatory programs are created equally. Wow, also not very shocking. So adding in the fact that this sort of information applies mainly to public schools that receive taxpayer money. Private schools, charter schools, homeschooling, all of that stuff, they can play by totally different rules. depending on the state and the local laws for that. So I don't want to get into all of those nuances and all of that stuff. So when I say sex education in schools or sex education in the U.S., I'm talking about mainly in a public school setting. So there are 3 main types of sex education in public schools nowadays, and that is abstinence only, abstinence plus, and comprehensive sex education. That's according to Wikipedia.
They have abstinence subscription products now.
Yeah, subscription-based abstinence. We love to see
Let's go.
Let's go capitalism. So going back to this chart from World Population Review that talks about the different types of educations per state, out of the 30 states where sex ed is mandatory in the United States, 20 of them are marked as stressing abstinence, while only the other 10 are marked as covering the topic of abstinence, or they do not have any specifics on the issue mandating how abstinence is covered. However,
and I'm assuming like cover abstinence is like, yeah, this exists. You can just not have sex. And
right.
Then stress is like, if you do have sex, you'll die. Like that's like that kind of thing.
Yeah, stress is like stressing abstinence pretty much means an abstinence only sort of a thing. That means that they may discuss like contraceptives or things like that, but they're basically like, yeah, condoms exist, but just don't, because like you shouldn't. Versus covering it is like, hey, another way that you could prevent this is by abstaining. Like they mention it as an option.
Don't vote.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Yay or nay, I abstain from sex.
Yes.
But yeah, so if they cover the topic, that just means that they present it as an option, but it's not the only thing. And then you got it. 19 states stress sex between married couples only. So that's like
that's the only way.
Am I not surprised?
That's the only way people can have sex, Lexi. You have to be married.
Yeah, it's like a force field will come around your genitals if you're not married.
Exactly.
Around your bird or bee.
Yeah, exactly. So 33 states in the United States actually have HIV education as mandatory. So that's, again, we're getting good numbers there. However, only 9 states are marked as being inclusive of sexual orientation within their education program. So you can imagine 33 states say, hey, you have to cover HIV education, but only 9 states are marked as being inclusive of sexual orientation. You can very quickly see the picture that you are going to be presented about HIV.
Yeah.
Again, that's me making a big generalization, but that's what I thought about when I saw that.
I was going to say, like, when you said there was so much HIV education, I was like, okay, but is it because it's actually, like, inclusive and talking about like, the history of it, or is it just what I think it is? And I think it's what I think it is.
No surprises there either. I know I just threw out a lot of numbers, but like I mentioned a little bit ago, what kind of picture is this painting from the data that we have?
It's hexagons.
Well, hexagons, you're correct. But I would say, first of all, it's creating a disorganized one. There's really no uniformity to all of this stuff. And it will be illustrated by a little chart that I put together using this World Population Review?
Yes,
World Population Review. I put together a quick little chart here that we can put on the screen. Don't worry, though, I will talk about it as well. So if you can't see the picture, that's fine. It is just a visual aid. So what I did was I compared 3 large culturally significant states in the United States. So we have California, New York, and Texas. Of course, this isn't representative of the whole picture, but that's what,
Yeah, there's 47 other states, Lexi. Where are those in your handy? I'm just joking.
Yeah, but these are the only 3 that matter, though.
I mean, here's the thing about it. No, but these 3 states give a fairly good picture of kind of some trends within the United States without having to deep dive into every single state and be here for 3 hours just talking about statistics.
Yeah.
So that's why I chose these 3 states, because they are culturally very influential, as well as just having large numbers most of the time. So let's take a look at California. So in California, sex education is mandatory, where they must cover the topic of abstinence. They are inclusive of sexual orientation and include topics of healthy relationships, contraception, and HIV education, but discussing topics of consent is not required. So they mostly get there, but there's still some stuff that's missing. You'll notice
they're mostly based.
Mostly based, true. You'll notice if you are watching the visuals here that I have a column as well that says negative outcomes and married only. That does not apply to California, but it will apply to Texas, meaning that if they teach the negative outcomes, they're basically telling you, here's why it's bad. Here's why you should abstain and only have sex within marriage because you'll die or whatever. I mean, they probably aren't saying you'll die, but like they're really trying to stress, hey, bad things will happen to you if you do this. So going to our next state, New York. So sex education is not mandatory in New York, and discussion of healthy relationships is not required, but HIV education specifically is mandatory. So they kind of say, you can do what you want. However, you do have to cover HIV. So
okay.
I think that's better than nothing, I guess, which kind of showcases the idea that within the state of New York, then you could be going to a school where, they are very pro-comprehensive sex education and you get a whole, spread of information, and you could maybe go to another school in New York and all that you get is, hey, here's how to prevent HIV. So very kind of wild
Yeah,
stuff.
that's interesting.
So
Again,
I'm a dum-dum. Whenever when you talk about them having to still cover how to prevent HIV, would that then basically say like ways to prevent it would include, again, abstinence / using protection of some sort? Like, would that be all that they need to say, or do they have to go into depth, or like what exactly is like the education on like HIV protection, I guess? Yeah,
so that's a great question. I didn't dive too deeply into this, but I'm under the impression of if, the state is making this mandatory, saying you have to talk about HIV, it could be as simple as maybe viewing a more historical lens and saying, hey, this is why you should abstain, and then that could be it. The school could decide to say, okay, hey, we're going to talk about this. We're going to talk about the history. We're going to talk about how it spread. We're going to give people education on how to prevent that. We're going to talk even about all of the things that have come about to help prevent that. Like we talked in the AIDS crisis episode about the PrEP and PEP and different medical interventions for people that are HIV positive. So maybe they cover that as well. But I would think that the bar is pretty low. It's probably just like, hey, you got to tell people this is bad.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So if I had to guess, it's probably not a very inclusive level of education. I think is just like, hey, if you cover it, you can check it off your list, sort of a thing.
Yeah, I'd imagine it's not super inclusive in that regard, or like has a super high priority put on it. It's just like, hey, did you know HIV is bad? All right, bye. Like that.
And that's it. That's literally it.
All right, there was your 20-minute PowerPoint. Bye.
There you go.
But if you are from New York, if you live in New York, if you got sex education in New York, of course, let us know if I said anything incorrectly. But yeah, I'm based on the picture I'm getting from what is considered mandatory in each state, I would say that there's probably a large range from just barely mentioning it to if a school district decides they are going to cover it in its entirety. So,
okay.
Alrighty, now we're moving on to the great state of Texas. Surprisingly, sex education is mandatory, which was shocking to me. However, they are to stress the topic of abstinence, discuss contraceptives, but covering consent is not required. They also discuss healthy relationships, but they stigmatize sexual orientations other than heterosexual, and they emphasize that sex should only be between a married couple. They stress the negative outcomes of teenage sex, and they do not require HIV education. So that is a little strange to me that they are like, yes, sex ed is mandatory and
it's important.
You have to talk about contraceptives, but you're stressing abstinence. You're saying if you're a teenager and you have sex, you're going to burst into flames, and it's only for married people, and no gays allowed. Like that's, you know.
And that's it.
And that's all you
Just
need
going,
to
yep.
know. So, of course, I'm oversimplifying that, but I think that's a very weird combination of things of like talking about healthy relationships, and then I'm thinking in my head, okay, but if you are stressing negative outcomes of teenage sex, then, and let me clarify, teenagers having sex with other teenagers. Let me be very, very clear about that. That's what we are discussing.
True.
Nothing else.
That's very important to mention. Yes,
it is. Saying like, man, no, you shouldn't, 16-year-old go have sex with another 16-year-old because you both burst into flames. But then it's like, oh, but we're gonna talk about healthy relationships. Like,
but talking about healthy relationships though, it does bring the idea to mind of like, what does Texas, like, what do the individual states consider healthy relationships? Because that could vary a lot. I'm assuming you're going to end up going down there, but
yeah, I'll talk a little bit about that, but I'm glad you brought that up because that's another thing that's kind of subjective is, since this is there's not a core education mandated, then yeah, what is a healthy relationship? Texas could be saying, yeah, we talk about healthy relationships between a married man and woman like that, but that doesn't really help everybody that's like in high school navigating relationships.
Do you believe that the healthy relationships that they cover are like, hey, if you're really into like U2 and you get with somebody who's in the country, that ain't gonna work. Like you really gotta stress. I know it's not actually that. Just trying to bring some levity to it.
Without venturing into sensitive topics, I would imagine it would probably be some education about like, hey, if somebody's treating you this way, that's not okay, and there are some resources for that. So I would hope that that's what the healthy relationship talk is about. Hey, if somebody's doing this to you, that's not okay, and you need to reach out for help.
That's my favorite subgenre of TikTok, healthy relationship talk. That's
true.
That's my favorite. Yes.
Is that an actual thing on TikTok?
Oh, I have no idea.
Oh,
he's just goofing because I said talking about healthy relationships, and he's like, "Wow, healthy relationship TikTok."
Oh, talk. Okay, got you.
Yeah, we watch a show where they call themselves Mom Talk, and so again, just anything that adds the word that sounds like talk afterwards.
Texas talk.
Yeah, Texas sexist talk.
We're on Texas sex ed talk. Oh my god. Anyway. So that was just a brief picture of, 3 different states within the United States and how much that can differ. So not only is the state of sex education, lacking any uniformity, but it also continues to be a divisive issue. Again, for everybody here on this podcast, that's not really shocking, but maybe shocking for some of our listeners.
Could I jump in and ask a question to you and then possibly Camp?
Yes.
Yeah.
So you've mentioned like these different states and what they have as their specific things of like yes and no, and this is a positive and this is a negative, and again, all of these, if you're seeing the visual on screen, consent is not mentioned in any of these states, as we've just said.
Yes,
but
consent education is not mandated in any of these 3 large states.
And you and I are both American. We both live where we live. Camp is not from the U.S. though, and I kind of wanted to ask him. I'm assuming you were going to get to this at some point, but much more like, hey, what was your like? Not mandatory, but like when you were growing up, was there, hey, the birds and the bees talk in school, or like what was your experience with that?
Well, here's the weird thing. I actually used to be, because I was technically like developmentally delayed or whatever, like as a younger dude, when I first started high school, you normally get like the sex ed stuff in grade 9, but I was in like a resource class that went over top of that. So I didn't actually get like proper sex ed from high school.
Wow, interesting.
But I do know, but I do know from, or maybe I did and I forgot. I don't know. My memory sucks. But anyway, from what I do know from friends and such, it is pretty comprehensive. Like, I believe abstinence was brought up, but there is also, talks about, masturbation and contraception being safe, STDs, blah, 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 blah. At that sort of thing. Like, it is pretty comprehensive, at least where I was.
Okay.
Wow.
In the good old Ontario.
Nice.
Hello, everyone. This is Camp coming to you from the future in the editing bay. I want to double back on this question because, as I said in the video, I don't remember or have a lot of experience with the sexual education system in Canada, so I thought it would be good to look up some information. I found an article I'll get Gordon to link to in the description where it goes over every province and what grades they teach certain subjects at. I was mostly correct about Ontario. You learn some stuff in like middle school range from grade 7 to grade 8, such as information about STIs and contraception. And then in grade 9, which is the year I would have missed, that's when you talk about sexual orientation, gender fluidity, and consent, interestingly. That said, a lot of other provinces do not enforce consent, I'm seeing as I scroll here. A lot of the places as well just don't mention gender fluidity, sexual orientation at all. Or if they do, then I don't have the data seeing it. Interestingly, talking about the names of reproductive organs and such like that can range wildly. Some provinces only have education on that in like middle school or high school, but there's a couple like Quebec who teach it in kindergarten level. So yeah, that's a very, very super quick and not in-depth summary of the Canadian sex ed system because I wasn't satisfied with the answer I gave. Back to editing.
You know, that's interesting that you brought up that you were like, you know, needing some additional instruction in school. And so when they're dealing with children who may have, and I'm not trying to put you into this box, but you're dealing with kids who may have a learning disability or who need some special assistance or additional classes of some kind, that they miss out on this conversation or this education in order to, you know, do whatever other class they need to do. And, you know, that actually highlights something that I wasn't going to discuss, but now since you brought it up, I think it's really good to cover of, and again, not lumping you into this, this just has brought me to this topic, is that when you have...
It's also a really wide, like it's also like the whole like class that I was in also had a wide range of people. Like there were people who were very developmentally delayed or had disabilities. And there were also people who were way smarter than me and more advanced than me and stuff like that. So it is, it's like a wide bucket that I don't feel ashamed of being part of. Like it's, you know,
Yeah, when you have students who have disabilities or who have neurodivergence and so they need that additional help, but then they're getting this other core, like, information cut out of the curriculum, we're also doing a disservice to those students with disabilities because they need this information too. And that's something that comes up with people who are way more qualified to talk about this than I am. But as I was looking into this, it was talking about the large gap between information related to students with disabilities and how a lot of people infantilize students with disabilities and say, well, you know, yeah, my student might be 15 years old, but they have this disability. So like, I don't need to worry about talking to them about any of this stuff because like, they're not even to that point yet or whatever. And I'm like, that is awful because statistically, children with disabilities are at a higher rate of being taken advantage of by adults and by other children. And so again, I don't have a quote for that because I wasn't, you know, or a citation because I wasn't prepared to discuss that. But I wanted to mention that that's something that's come up in my own personal life. I have some family members who are disabled, and I remember speaking with them, or they have been younger than me at certain points, and just being like, hey, I really hope their school or their family or whoever is speaking to them because, you know, they're a very trusting individual.
Like actually warning them, warning them about, like, you know, some people don't have your best interests in mind, right?
Yes.
Like, there are some people out there who will try to take advantage of you, and it's important that they know about that as well. Right. That everyone does.
Yes, I agree wholeheartedly.
It's very, like, when you're talking about that, and like, maybe it's just because I'm getting older and I'm looking back on stuff of, I remember specifically hearing from somebody in my past that like some of their nieces and nephews were not engaging, but had heard about people in middle school age, so again, 6th, 7th, or 8th grade here, engaging in sexual activity. And it's one of those very weird things where, like, I'm sitting there like, bro, I didn't learn about this stuff until I was like into high school, and again, like much further down the line and stuff. And so it is this very like, hey, not that you just like, okay, well, now we got to move the bar up to like middle school, but like, hey, if kids are engaging in stuff like this also, like, especially because you're already younger, you're not able to have as much critical thinking or even just the wherewithal to know about everything that is happening at that age. It's like, hey, no, you are still doing some very very dangerous stuff as like a 7th grader, dude. Like, what are you doing, basically?
Well, and
no, Dev, I honestly agree with that completely, because it's like, obviously you should wait till people are more mature and able to properly process and digest the information for things like sex ed. But also when they're younger, you should still at least arm them with kind of like the knowledge of like, hey, if this happens, this is bad and you gotta be safe and do this instead. Or if someone does this to you, I tell an adult, get out of there. That sort of thing.
Yeah, and I'm glad you guys brought that up, because that's another thing that we will discuss a little bit later on, is that I think so many parents and family members assume, well, like my kid or my loved one, they're not interested in that. They would never do that. And that's a dumb way to think, just straight up. I'm going to be judgmental. That's a dumb way to think.
Got 'em. Ooh, get toasted, family member.
They are still living in the real world. And so even if they themselves, maybe they're not interested. I mean, I can only speak for myself of like, I was not a sexually active person in high school. I just didn't really care. But guess what? I'm not the norm. So that doesn't mean that just because, I delayed that until my college years doesn't mean that I should have never gotten any of that information, because guess what? I still heard it from people on the bus. I was still getting information online. And guess what? I got a lot of misinformation and disinformation.
If you hold hands, you get pregnant.
I still think it's important for people to discuss these topics with young people, because even if there's somebody that are like, la, 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 I don't want to know, I'm not interested, the information is still powerful. And it could be something where you are educating your child or your, young loved ones in your family, and they can use that information and help a friend, or, say, hey, I don't have a use for this information, but, my best friend was talking to me about this kind of stuff, and I can share that actual factual information with them and maybe help them out as well. So I think it goes a very long way in that realm.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah. And I also like what you brought up about like parents as well, in a situation where it's like, oh, well, my kid would never do something like that. It's like, you don't really know like everything about your kids though.
Yeah.
Right?
Like, and
it's
you
like,
shouldn't.
Like, no,
I'd
you shouldn't.
argue you
It's like when it's single digits in age and you're teaching them how to survive and stuff like that, then like, a majority, but like, once they're double digits, like preteen, teens, they're going to school, they're making friends, they're doing activities or whatever. It's like, you don't know everything about them, and that's totally fine. That's okay. Like, you don't have to be exactly like your kid or vice versa. So either way, it's like, if you suspect your son's like smoking weed or something, it's like, just, give him the warnings, let him know like what can happen if stuff goes wrong and whatever.
Camp, my child is a mini me, and only I know exactly what they think and feel on every single day, and nothing has changed since I had a child. So it's the exact same as when I was in elementary, middle, and high school, and there's not been any advancement. Social media doesn't exist. Like, yes.
Yeah.
I was going to say, it is so sad how many like grown adults unironically think like that.
Exactly.
What's the Snapchat?
It's so
What's
bad.
Snapchat? Oh my gosh. But yeah, I'm glad we could cover some of that, because there were a couple of pieces of that I was not originally going to cover, and then there's a couple of those that I'm going to get to in a little bit. But I remember thinking that it was really baffling to me why learning about our bodies and our interactions with one another is such a polarizing topic. It's like, it shouldn't be that controversial, yet it is. And I think the reason that it is such a highly debated area, especially in the United States, is because it's so closely linked with morality. And I know that other countries have unique factors as to why, it's linked to morality or why certain behaviors are the way they are. But I think the United States is a little bit interesting in that regard of, this is like, sexual education is a very polarizing topic, and it's strange to me, but once I, consider other perspectives, I'm like, okay, I get it. But I'm also like, gosh, this is so dumb. It should not be polarizing. Because even while I was looking up information for this episode, one of the first results I got when I was looking up like, comprehensive sex ed in the United States or something like that, was a website that was called stopcomprehensivesexeducation.org. And I'm not citing them because I think that's
thank you for all of your information, website. We appreciate
So beautiful. The fact that you would want to stop something comprehensive, that's like a self-report in the domain
Yeah.
already. Like, oh my gosh.
I know.
Oh my God.
So yeah, I'm not citing them because I think it's bullshit and I'm allowed to be biased on my podcast with my two like-minded hosts. But yeah.
There you go.
Wanted to share that was one of the first results that came up. And I was stunned because I'm like, damn, is it really that threatening? And then
Yes.
when I
Yes.
considered all of the things I've been reading, I'm like, oh, actually, yeah, it is, because knowledge and bodily autonomy is a threat to those who want to maintain power and control. And I won't go on that rant quite yet, but I was like, damn, it's all making
Quite
sense.
yet, she says.
Yeah, it's all making sense now.
Yeah, it does.
But with that in mind, I have a game.
She goes, speaking of butts. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, pretty much. Speaking of butts.
How could you forget these butts?
Yeah, no, that would be, we would be blocked and
No, not yeah.
whatever.
That would be the Patreon exclusive. That would
Let's
have to
go. It's
So
just three photos of asses, and you have to guess which one is each of ours. That's the
Oh my
Patreon
God! How about no?
be. And then the plot twist is that it's my ass, but
Three
from
times.
different angles.
Yes. Oh, that'd be so
Okay,
funny.
so this game is not about asses at all, and it's actually somewhat educational. But I couldn't think of a better name, so this is just called The Game for this episode. And I'm going to ask you guys a few questions, and you have to answer them. I have 3 questions here. And I don't know if this is really a competition or not. This is more of just like a little quiz or a primer here. But I've got 3 questions, and I will give you guys 3 answers for each, and then you just have to tell me what your answer A, B, or C is for the question. So,
All right.
the first question is, which presidential administration gave the most funding to abstinence-only education? Was it
Washington.
A? I'm giving you choices. You don't have to just pull it out of your ass. A, Ronald Reagan. B, Bill Clinton. C, George W. Bush. For which presidential administration gave the most funding to abstinence-only education?
Bro, these were. I thought you were gonna be like, "What's a penis?" Like I thought that was gonna be the
No,
question.
I told you I'm not going to be like hee funny. This is actually a somewhat educational.
I know, but this is an
game.
actual hard question. Yeah,
I know it is.
Well, I mean,
Testing
okay.
your knowledge.
So, I
Because
mean,
there's like again, I think Eric's going on or Cam's going on the same thing as I am. Of like Reagan, you would assume because he was like hardcore, like we need to save the kids and blah, blah, blah. But like
Yeah.
based off.
Well,
of
but he
other-
also didn't give a shit about the AIDS crisis. So I mean,
Yup,
like,
which we
Yeah,
have
so
covered.
again,
I
Yup.
don't think he would spend nearly as much.
But that's the thing is you have that, and then like even for Clinton and like Bush, you're like, well, maybe it's not Clinton, but then also I don't know, like, is it a trick question? Like, I'm just so confused.
It's not a trick question.
I'm gonna say Bush because the idea of Bill Clinton funding a lot of sex ed while he was doing what he was doing in the Oval Office, would be kind
Okay.
of funny.
Yeah.
All
So
right.
I will say Bush.
Good
I'll
logic.
say Reagan because she said it's not a trick question, just so we have at least a
Yeah,
spread.
it's not a trick question. Okay, so we've got
Ooh, okay.
Camp saying Bush and Gurdon saying A, Ronald Reagan. Is that correct?
Yeah.
All right, you are both wrong.
So, yeah, I see. I did.
Really?
It's not a trick
Is-
question.
It's not.
God.
It's not
Oh
a
my
trick
God. Oh my
question.
God. I've been
It's not
lied
a
to.
trick question.
Recount.
It was B.
I mean, I know
Bill
it wasn't a trick
Clinton.
question, but I was trying to use facts and logic.
It's a
to,
question that throws you off. It's not a trick question. This is
fair.
because there was a study that showed the most funding for abstinence-only education was voted on in 1997, which would have been during the Bill Clinton's administration. So they voted on to raise the amount of funding going towards abstinence-only programs. So
okay.
not a trick question, but definitely, like you said, Camp, very ironic, very interesting.
Very
that,
ironic.
You know, a president that is.
I feel bamboozled, but I
You know.
understand.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
you know
Al-
what?
Also,
It's-
the only Democrat on that list.
Yeah, also that.
Abstinence.
And here's all this to say that neither Ronald Reagan nor George W. Bush are without sin in the category of sexual education or when it comes to wellness for people. But as it relates to what we're talking about today, that was the type of question I wanted to ask. So,
Gotcha.
okay, are we ready for the second one? This is also not a trick
Yeah.
question.
Let's go!
I can't wait till we go 0-3 on these, Camp. I'm so excited.
Okay, so the United States ranks first among developed nations for A, sex outside of marriage, B, education on healthy relationships, C, teenage pregnancy.
I hate this.
The
I hate
US
all
ranks
of these
first
could fit.
among
hate
developed
this.
nations for what?
So definitely either A or C. I'm gonna go A. That's the
Sex outside marriage?
yeah. That's I'm gonna go with A because I feel like other places might have because I know it's not B. And C, teenage
Now I'm
pregnancy.
going
I feel like there
B,
might be other countries. You're gonna go B.
Yeah, now because Lexi makes me think it's going to be a trick question, so I'm going B.
I told you it's not a trick question. This is not a trick question. None
I'm
of these
going
are
B
tricks.
still. I'm still
You're
sticking
going to
with
say
B.
that's what a
education
trickster
on
would say.
relationships, B?
Yeah, I'm going B.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, you are both wrong. The U.S. ranks first among
What?
developed nations for teenage pregnancy. So,
Oh, we're going
this
0
is
and 3.
according to an article from the journal PLOS. In 2011, the U.S. led in teen pregnancy rates and STI rates. Now, I do believe this is outdated information at this point, but the U.S. still does have a teen birth rate of 13.1 per 1,000 teens aged 15 to 19, which is higher
that's pretty
than
low.
Damn, yeah.
the UK, Germany, France, Turkey, Australia, Sweden, Japan, Canada, just name a few. There are a lot of countries that
are
have a
developed,
much
yes.
lower teen pregnancy, teen birth rate,
Yeah.
I should say, than the United States.
Lexi, would you like me to ask you a question now, not
Sure.
about that specific thing? I've heard some people say that with the lowering of the teen pregnancy rate, that it is a very, if you jump through a bunch of mental gymnastics hoops, that, it actually shows some very negative signs about people going out with relationships, and that they are not being as, I forget exactly what people complain. They found a way to complain about teen pregnancy being a good thing, basically.
I think I know where you're going with it. Basically saying that if the teen pregnancy rate is at a much lower rate, that means that probably, again, this is just parallels or assumptions, I should say. Assumptions we can draw from this, even though I don't necessarily agree, that would mean, well, then that means that more teenagers aren't dating and they're not in relationships and, they're not doing this, that, or the other thing. And, there's probably some truth to that, because we do have studies that are showing that Gen Z and into Gen Alpha, that they are more disinterested, or less interested, I should say, in relationships than people of other generations, as well as it being more difficult to actually meet people, because back in the Boomer generation and Gen X, it was marriage was, it was somebody that I met through a friend, or I met them through school, and proximity was very much involved. And now we see that proximity isn't actually as much of a factor as it once was. Yeah. So I don't have the data on that to back it up for this episode, but of course people would find a way to spin, lower teen pregnancy rates in a way that means people don't want to talk to each other. And honestly, some of that could be true, but at the same time, I think
correlation
lower teen
does
pregnancy,
not equal causation.
Yeah, lower teen pregnancy
yeah.
rates are something to celebrate. Now, if the source of that is because less teenagers are actually dating and or, in sexual relationships, yeah, I would say that that's probably an issue. But also, if it is a matter of because they have more access to contraceptives, that's a positive. So
exactly.
Yeah.
I think it's
if
a
it's
toss-up.
more access to that and also better sex ed, then I think it's okay.
Yeah.
I think it's a good thing, actually.
And I mean, the other thing too is these people that are whining about it, that are saying, oh my gosh, comprehensive sex ed is a problem. If it's just more people that are straight up afraid to even engage in sexual activity, isn't that a win for those people? It's not for me, but
you would assume
they'd be like, wow,
it's
they're
do you
too
want
scared.
to teach abstinence or get teenagers pregnant by other teenagers? You can't have it both
Right.
ways. You can't have it both ways.
It's just
But
so
I want my
goofy.
cake and I want to eat it too, though.
Yeah.
When...
Meanwhile, there are states that are trying to lower the age of consent / make child marriages a thing. So,
True. You can't have teenage pregnancy if you lower what the defining age of a teenager is.
You know, that's actually, well, I guess I was going to say teenage pregnancy would still be categorized as ages 15 through 19, whether you were married regardless, you know. Like,
Lexi, I have another question.
Yes?
The term teenager was only invented after World War II, so before World War II, did the teenage pregnancy just not exist?
That's a great question.
They probably had a different name for it.
The classification of that, it didn't exist, but were there pregnant 15-year-olds? Absolutely.
Oh, I know. I just wanted to throw you off with there was no teen, so there was zero teen pregnancy.
Next question. We going back. We going back.
What we do here is go back.
Third and final question.
All right, 0 for 3. 0 for 3, Camp. We got this.
Let's go.
Let's go.
Is this a trick question?
It is not a trick. None of these have been tricks. They're all cited. None of these are tricks. During World War I, the rate of STIs, which were previously referred to as venereal diseases, for American soldiers was how much higher than other groups? A, 35% higher. B, 50% higher. C, 70% higher.
Ooh. When you say compared to other groups, do you mean like people who
French,
weren't serving, or
like French, German,
other soldiers,
other soldiers? Okay,
yes. The grouping of different country soldiers.
I'm gonna just take the highest number, just because.
Okay.
Yeah.
That works out for me because I was gonna middle of the road it. I was gonna say 50.
Okay. So Gurdon, you're saying C 70%, and then Camp, you are saying B 50%.
I have a feeling we're actually going to get this one right, though, Camp. So sadly, we're going to miss out on the.
Let's find out.
I know.
Okay, Camp is correct.
Yo!
The rate of STIs, previously referred to as venereal diseases, was 50% higher for American soldiers than soldiers of other countries.
Dang. Makes sense.
You want to know why I went with the highest number possible? Because
why?
During World War I, it was all mostly over in Europe and across Asia and stuff like that, and Africa and stuff. Mm-hmm. So like by the time like Americans got there, like they were all just like, oh, cool, like we're here. And so most of the like insane, crazy fighting, I feel like had really already taken place. And so all the Americans just showed up being much more like, hey, yo, where the women at? While all the men from like, were like all the soldiers from like France were shell shocked from fighting for the last 5 years.
Trench foot.
Yeah.
I ain't doing that. Yeah.
That's probably not true, but that's just what my mind went to of like, they probably showed up like, yo, where the bitches? So.
Well, truly though, I mean, that's a good guess. That's some good information to make a guess with of like, because the United States entered World War I at a later date, much later into the fighting, that would make more sense that you're like, well, maybe their attitude was much more relaxed than the people in France who had been there since 1914, you know, still fighting. Like, dude, what do you mean? Wanted to cite my source from here. This is from KU Med Center by Dr. Frederick Holmes. He wrote an article about venereal disease during World War I, and I thought that was absolutely wild. Some of the posters, I'll link this source below. I don't want to get too deep into it, but I will link it below. If you're interested, this article shows some of the posters of warning soldiers about syphilis and gonorrhea and calling it venereal disease. And some of these posters are wild. So if you have a moment to check that out.
We can finally do our episode on the clap with this one.
Yeah. Well, you know what? Actually, yeah, I'll send you this picture. We can put this on the screen. This is a poster to warn soldiers about venereal disease, and it is a woman that's kind of leaning out of a window suggestively, and it says, just another quote claptrap. You can ruin your future with VD. And the soldier's like, me? Pointing at himself like, booby woman's looking at me? So
well, it only took 42 episodes, but we did talk about the clap.
Yeah,
we finally have our.
We actually did.
For those that don't know, we clap sync at the beginning of every episode, and I go like, all right, Camp will kind of sound like, all right, 3, 2, 1, clap. And afterwards, I'm like, dang, we should do an episode on the clap. And every time,
well, you know what?
Lexi and Camp are like, no, we're not doing an episode on the clap.
Here we are, brief. Clap mentioned.
Yep.
Let's go. Mission accomplished.
So, Camp wins the game today with 1 point. Woohoo! And your prize is knowing facts.
Oh.
So true. Well, no, I don't want to get the clap. That'd be awkward.
I was going to say your prize is the knowledge you got along the way.
Yeah.
So, with some statistics out of the way, this last question is actually a great segue into the next bit that we're going to talk about. So, we have talked a lot about the data, the numbers, the different states, all this stuff, but let's back up just a bit and talk about the history or the beginnings of sexual education in the United States. So, as much as you might think that the United States has always been very abstinence-focused, you would actually be mistaken. So according to Wikipedia, where they discuss sexual education in the United States, sex education in public schools before 1900 and the 1900s was very minimal. They barely covered it.
Nobody had
rarely
sex
covered
before then.
it. Yeah, totally. So really not a huge surprise there that it was not included in the curriculum. However, there was a push to incorporate sex education into public schools after World War I, due to the spread of sexually transmitted infections, which again used to be lovingly called venereal diseases. And also, this is not noted in the Wikipedia article, but we kind of discussed this a little bit, that World War I changed a ton of things culturally. So this also might have played a role as well as far as people's attitudes about that type of education.
So I have to mention it because my thought of it, like when you're like, it changed everything, and they were like, it did. It was so impactful that they had to run it back with World War II is what my brain thought of. So I'm very, very sorry. But
oh my goodness. What we do here is go back. So now I'm going to read a direct quote from the Wikipedia page because I think this is very fascinating. It says, quote, "In 1919, the U.S. Department of Labor's Children's Bureau published a report suggesting that sex education in schools could better prepare the U.S. military soldiers in the future. From the 1920s to the 1950s, there was a series of incremental steps to include sex education in public schools, framed largely as a hygiene issue, with the U.S. Office of Education publishing the first sex education materials to train teachers in the 1930s.
Okay.
So two things out of that quote. First of all, that it was framed as a hygiene issue, which true, it is. It's a public health sort of a thing.
Wash your balls, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, no, meaning like,
I know,
maintain. But also that sex education could better prepare the U.S. military soldiers.
Yeah.
So it's very funny how war influences literally everything.
Yep.
We need to start framing a lot of our modern day issues around, but this will help our soldiers if we do this. So like, if we do XYZ thing, that could help our soldiers. And then it'd be like, oh, okay, like that'll help get this bill passed. That's what we should do.
Yeah, right.
Honestly, yeah.
Yeah, do the Uno reverse card, trick them.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. So fast forward to the sexual revolution of the 1960s, because obviously through the 20s through the 50s, they're gradually stepping up this sorts of education. Then we hit the 1960s, and this is where things started to become more polarizing. If they weren't already, they very much ramped up here. There were various conservative and religiously affiliated groups. Gasp! Oh my gosh! Wow, we're so shocked. Fork found in kitchen.
What?
And they were the ones opposing sex education in public schools. Quote, "In 1964, the Sexual Information and Education Council of the U.S., or SIECUS, was founded, advocating for sex education in schools as an important part of general civil education." So this is according to the Wikipedia source. And like a handful of other topics that we've discussed on this podcast, the 1960s was an era of much social change, which did not come without opposition. So you had this new council, or newer council that was founded, saying that, hey, this is important for general civil education. Oh my gosh, I said civic, whatever. Civil.
Honda Civic education, yes.
Honda
Close
Civic.
enough.
Similar enough words to say like, hey, the average person benefits from learning this information. So like, yay, that's great. However, again, as I mentioned, not everybody liked that. So this goes on through the 60s and the 70s. And then according to the National Coalition Against Censorship, they have a timeline of abstinence-only education on their website. They said that the widespread implementation of abstinence-only education started markedly in 1981 with the passing of the Adolescent Family Life Act, also known as AFLA, which was dubbed the Chastity Law. So basically this said, hey, this act allots certain money to abstinence-only education programs, as well as emphasizing people's self-discipline and chastity. So that's why people called it the Chastity Law, because that's what it was supposed to do. And it did, interestingly enough as well, provide money and support for pregnant or parenting teens and their families. So they
so
did.
There was some positives, yeah.
There was a little bit of help there of like, hey, we're going to promote abstinence only. However, if you are a teen that gets pregnant, we do have some services for you. Now, were those services actually helpful and not shameful? Not saying, hey, you're bad because you did this. Who knows? Didn't look into that part, but we can make some assumptions, I believe. So why do we think this was? Why was there such this big push in the 80s? You think the 80s is pretty there's some wild stuff going on in the 80s. So why all of a sudden this push for abstinence only? Well, another quote here helps sum it up. Quote, "The infiltration of abstinence-only education was largely brought about by heteronormative Christian ideals of the 1970s and 80s that wanted public schools to have a focus on teachings of the Bible."
Second fork found in kitchen.
Yes. Still quoting, "This specific avenue for sex education was given more relevance by the idea that sex education that focused on reproductive health, for example, condoms, hormonal birth control, etc., was promoting a, quote, fast and loose attitude about teenagers having sex." End quote. That was from the Wikipedia page. So they were like, all these kids are fast and loose. They need to read the Bible.
Oh my God. They got to read the Bible.
And then 10 to 15 years later, they were like, these kids these days are just so fast and furious. Oh my God.
Exactly.
They're so fast and furious too, starring Vin Diesel.
Spawned media empire.
Tokyo Drift.
But speaking of movies, it's interesting that you mentioned that.
Oh my God.
The next little part that I had was, I found that quote kind of funny because it reminded me of the movie Footloose, how dancing is it's bad and it's not allowed, and the kids in the town are like, but we want to dance anyway. And so
if you don't know how to dance, you don't know how to have sex, of course. That's the meaning there.
It's the same thing.
Keep going, Lexi.
That's not where I was going to go at all. I was going to say it. The kids then are protesting and they do a dance anyway. And so that's kind of comparable to kids are going to find ways to engage in sexual activity, whether you like it or not.
If you take away my vape, Mom, I'm going to get another one.
Oh my goodness.
Source, we were all kids at one point and we were all stupid.
Yeah.
And we all vaped massive vape clouds.
I vaped so cloudily.
Same. Spoiler alert, I don't think a single person on this call vaped. Anyway.
Yeah, no, I've never vaped in my life.
Oh, you haven't, Camp? I was going to say you might have been the only one that
No, I haven't ever actually. I mean I technically I have a disposable weed pen or whatever, but I don't think that's a vape technically. I don't have a dedicated smoke machine.
Yeah, I think a weed pen is different than a vape in my mind.
Well, yeah, because it is different stuff in it. Yeah.
Anyway.
It's technically vapor, but yeah.
Not talking about vapes on this episode.
How could you forget the vape revolution?
Yeah.
There we go.
If anybody else wants to do that, I ain't. Yeah, but basically talking about how this came to be and how abstinence only became the dominant form of education. And I think that also this was fueled by the AIDS crisis, which we've, again, discussed in the podcast we made reference to. I think a lot of people were very afraid, and so they were like, well, hey, the best way to prevent the spread of HIV is if you don't engage in sexual activity. And again, there's some truth to that. Of course, that's a true statement. If you're not engaging in sexual activity, then you don't run any of the risks of sexual activity. But it's just dumb to be like, oh, we'll just say don't do it, and then people won't do it because that works so well.
It's making a large assumption about what people think humans do naturally. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's very...
Right.
Like,
as if they were never young people themselves when they get to the point of being able to make decisions.
If you would have asked me what the 2 most impactful episodes of this podcast would be, my guess would not have been the one where we say we're all just dudes from San Francisco and the art of the AIDS crisis. Like, that's just on such different...
they're both great episodes,
but they're on such different exactly. They're so different and so far apart. But that's so funny. They've impacted so much of this podcast.
Right. So thankfully, though, in 2010... there was a federal program that funded abstinence-only education through the AFLA, and that program was eliminated. Woo!
Thanks, Obama.
However, thanks, Obama. However, that was only a drop in the bucket for this stuff, because according to the Wikipedia article, it says, quote, as of spring 2016, at implementation of federal funds is determined and allocated at a state, individual state, district, and school board level. That did not make a lot of sense when I read that, but it does now that I'm thinking about it. And continuing the quote, in 2014, the CDC conducted a, quote, school health policies and practices study, which revealed that on average, schools require providing approximately 6.2 hours of education on human sexuality with 4 or less hours of information on STIs, HIV, and pregnancy prevention. End quote. So 6 hours total of education on human sexuality. That is
dang, that's
nothing.
Not enough. That's not.
It's a very weird thing because like I understand when they're like this 6 hours and like limited and stuff like that. Like I really don't understand that part, but my assumption is they're like, well, their parents will talk to them about all of this stuff. And like, sure, there are parents that will sit there and be like, all right, Timmy, here's a bird and here's a bee. And like, of course, they like explain it and like try to be much more open. And especially like the more progressive you are with like, oh, hey, let's talk more about like what's healthy and what's unhealthy. Let's talk about like consent. Let's talk about all of these things. But like, if you just don't include it, there's going to still be a large percent of the population that just does not get any form of education on that. Like you're just going to have swaths of people that grow up and the only information they get is like when Family Guy opens up and they say sex on TV, like that's going to be about the only sex that they get is like Family Guy and stuff like that. Like it's really weird. I know. I'm just making. I was trying to make a joke, but either you laughed about my Family Guy bit.
Well, no, because I thought you're right of like, you know, tuning into these shows where there's sexual jokes and sexual innuendos and, you know, kids being like, oh, well, what does that even mean? I don't even know.
And now it's TikTok and kick streamers where they're just like, anyway, my cortisol level's spiking, gonna go do some banging. I don't know what people say these days.
And that is something that I bring up here in just a moment about, you know, people talking about parental rights and, well, I should be able to tell my kid whatever I want to tell them. Problem is, there are so many parents out there that have a hard time even feeding and clothing their children. You cannot convince me that these people will have enough time and or money or resources to sit down and have a comprehensive discussion with them about sexual education.
It's not only that, but it's also like making the grand assumption that the parents actually have the best intentions for their kids in mind. You know?
Removing the moral element from it or the religious element from it completely, and even those are huge. Just straight up time and resources. Some parents are like, hey, I'm working 2 jobs. I don't have time to every week check in with Timmy about like sexual education, you know, on top of everything else. Like it's just a goofy expectation that we have, or unrealistic, I should say, more than goofy.
Goofy expectation, true.
Goofy expectation.
But as much as we hear about this loud minority of people in the U.S. rant about all the woke and public schools covering these topics that they deem inappropriate and, oh, they're brainwashing people and all this shit, like, the fact is, like, it's been a thing for a long time, and it will continue to be a thing. And I thought that this was interesting. This is a quote from the Wikipedia again. It says, quote, sex education in the 20th century focused on abstinence and methods to prevent pregnancy. During the Second World War, run it back, that wasn't in the quote. In the context of fears about rising divorce rates, immigration, and birthright citizenship, the curriculum in some areas portrayed a woman's choice of a fit mate as a civic duty, end quote.
Huh.
basically saying, women, it's on you now. It's on you again.
Of
you
course.
better pick the right
Yep.
mate. Totally
Jesus.
doesn't sound like eugenics at all. Totally not related. I'm sure.
No, it's not.
Absolutely
Of course
not.
No.
What?
I was just like, wow. That's not surprising, but crazy.
It's still sad. Disappointed, but not surprised.
Right.
Yup.
To pick back up for that quote, says, quote, in the 21st century, where we are, common curriculum in American schools, sex education classes include instruction on sexual health topics, including human sexuality, HIV and STI prevention, and pregnancy prevention that are more commonly required in high school than in middle or elementary school. Statistics provided by the Center for Disease Control, the CDC, reveal that between 2000 and 2014, the portion of schools providing information on sexual health education, including topics such as abstinence, puberty, and how to properly use a condom, declined. Gasp, shock, oh my gosh.
Gasp.
Also,
there's even a spoon in this kitchen? Let's go.
I'm going to date myself. The years 2000 to 2014 was the exact timeline that I was in school. That is pretty wild. Continuing the quote here, quote, the CDC has identified 19 critical sexual education topics that should be taught in all middle and high schools. In 2014, fewer than half of high schools and only 20% of middle schools provided instruction on all 16 topics, used to be 16 topics, that the CDC considers essential to sexual health education. End quote. That was from the Wikipedia on sexual education in the United States.
Wow.
So,
Dang.
yeah, fewer
That's
than
pretty
half
abysmal.
of high schools and only 20% of middle schools. And that was back in 2014. That was over 10 years ago. I cannot imagine it is any better.
And
at
it's
this
only,
current
dang
rate.
it, she beat me to it. I was going to say, and it's only gotten better since then.
Oh, yeah. you know it. So I'm going to
Yippee.
actually share with you guys the 19 critical sex education topics, and I will read them as well for the audio
Lexi, can
only
you do it
listeners.
in a critical voice, please? Like I assume that you would do.
Oh, no, I can't do a moist critical voice.
Dang it. Okay.
Okay, I was going to send this to you guys, but for some reason it's not going to copy. So we will put it up on screen for the viewers, and I will read them for the audio listeners. So these are the CDC 19 critical sexual education topics. This is from 2016. We have 1, communication and negotiation skills. 2, goal setting and decision making. 3, how to create and sustain healthy and respectful relationships. 4, influences of family, peers, media, technology, and other factors on sexual risk behavior. 5, preventative care that is necessary to maintain reproductive and sexual health. 6, influencing and supporting others to avoid or reduce sexual risk behaviors. 7, the benefits of being sexually abstinent. 8, efficacy of condoms. 9, importance of using condoms consistently and correctly. 10, importance of using a condom at the same time as another form of contraception to prevent both STIs and pregnancy. 11, how to obtain condoms. 12, how to correctly use a condom. 13, methods of contraception other than condoms. 14, how to access valid and reliable information, products, and services related to HIV, STIs, and pregnancy. 15, how HIV and other STIs are transmitted. 16, health consequences of HIV and other STIs and pregnancy. 17, the importance of limiting the number of sexual partners. 18, sexual orientation. And 19, gender roles, gender identity, or gender expression. Now, I will also note that when it mentions STDs, I use the more updated term for that, STIs, because most sexually transmitted infections are just that. They're an infection. They are not a disease. So that is the only change I have made to that chart.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Wow.
So thoughts on $19 Fortnite card? Thoughts on thoughts on those
I do love the
topics?
$19 Fortnite card, but most of those are based, I would say. I like it seems comprehensive. It covers a lot of bases that I think is good.
True.
I can tell, or I can see why a lot of states don't want to do it because they're,
Yeah, I think
It's
the
the world we're
only
living in.
thing for me is like they have like 4 bullet points about the efficacy of condoms, using them correctly, how to obtain them, using them correctly. I'm like, this could all be looped into one
this
point
could be an
about,
email.
Like,
I was gonna say, yeah, that's kind of, it's like how to obtain condoms. You go to a pharmacy. I don't know, like what do you mean?
But that's like
condom store. Come on.
I think that loops into the importance of using them consistently and correctly. Like, you could talk about how to obtain them in that bullet point. I don't know that we need 4 bullet points about correctly using a condom. That felt a little repetitive to me. But other than that's my only gripe, is just a, administrative one, I guess.
Yeah.
And
no, I got that. Kind of streamline that a little bit.
And like you mentioned, Camp, you hit it right on the head. The next thing I was going to talk about, you could see why, once we've read these 19 critical topics, certain people, specifically a lot of conservative groups, get quite angry about this, especially the last two, number 18 and number 19, being sexual orientation and then gender roles, gender identity, or gender expression. I think those are the ones that people typically are ranting the most about. These days.
They made my sex ed woke.
Yeah. And it's bad enough that people want to make this sort of thing into a culture war, but conservative opinions and conservative groups, which lead to then conservative money, is being used to cause real harm to people within this realm. There is a fantastic article by Ali Rogan for PBS that is an interview with the Vice President of Education at the Planned Parenthood Federation of America. And this Vice President's name is Sarah Flowers. And this is not a sponsored bit, but I'm glad I found this because this is a cause I believe in, and I actively donate to the Planned Parenthood Federation of America. So that was very, very cool to.
Oh, Lexi's woke. Okay.
Yeah. Wow. Oh my gosh. If you didn't know by now, you know now.
If you got
I feel like you would know by now.
If you got a whole hour into this podcast,
episodes in.
If you got
and a whole hour into this one, it's like, hi.
And you finally, after all of this and all the terminology in the beginning, when Lexi basically says, "Yes, I'm very passionate about this subject," that finally you've just discovered that she's woke.
Yeah.
You're on the same page as I am.
Hi,
I just
my
learned
name
myself.
is Woke Lexi. Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah. So this PBS article, this was from 2024, but it stated that, quote, at least 135 bills pertaining to sexual education have been introduced or in place nationally, a majority of which would place restrictions on sexual education in public schools. That's a quote from the PBS article. And that was in 2024. There's 135 bills that would restrict sexual education. Like, that's, wow.
And there's only 50 states. That's like,
oh my gosh, that's like at least 2 per state. Oh my God.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Math. But this is kind of a little bit of the wrap up here, and I'm just going to read a couple of quotes, a couple of Sarah's answers to some of the questions that were asked by journalist Ali Rogan. So Ali asks, quote, "What does comprehensive sex education look like?" Sarah Flowers, again, VP of Education at Planned Parenthood Federation of America, her response is, quote, "So it's incredibly important to start these conversations at home and in school and to have them early and often. What I mean by this is building blocks. When we teach math, we start with the basics. Kids learn to count 0, 1, 2, 3. Eventually, we move into addition and subtraction. We don't start with calculus. So for topics like consent, if you're a small child, you understand that you don't want someone to take your truck without asking. In elementary school, consent covers topics like how to ask before taking a snack from someone else's lunchbox, or how to respect another person's decision not wanting to be hugged. In middle school, learning about consent includes talking about peer pressure, learning assertive communication skills, thinking about your own boundaries, and learning to respect the boundaries of others. In high school, we talk about consent during sex. We talk about thinking about what we ourselves would like, getting clear on our own wants and dislikes, and being a good listener, making space for a partner to communicate their wants and needs, and being able to say no, and also to respect somebody else's wishes. Now, it also talks about how to continually check in and make sure that everyone feels safe as the relationship evolves. So that's the end of the quote there. And I felt like that was just very fantastically worded and said. It was very simple, giving examples for each age group. And I feel like even if you're not from the United States, you don't live in the United States, you've heard conservative arguments against this type of education. And maybe they come at it from the rights of like parents saying, well, I should be able to teach my kid what I find important and not topics that are too grown for them or whatever.
Too woke.
And sometimes that's a religious spin of, well, my religion says that these things are wrong, so I'm just going to tell my kid that these things are wrong and I shouldn't have to educate them about it. Or even just the fear mongering about the cultural slippery slope, which is the woke argument of, what's next? My child can identify as a chicken, or I have to ask them for consent to change their diaper, and people that are ranting about shit like that, basically. And no matter the angle that somebody tries to come at this with, Sarah Flowers has a very succinct way of describing these types of opponents to sex education. She says, quote, "It's really important to understand that sex education is under attack. And it is under attack by the same groups that are trying to ban books, stop trans youth from being able to play sports or use the bathrooms that they need, and the same groups that are trying to ban teaching accurate history. The bans are all connected, and which tells us that these groups are actually working to exert power and control over our children, and they are not trying to keep kids safe and healthy." Again, that's the PBS article.
Moi.
So
said so freaking beautifully. I almost swore, but it's because that's
so good. I almost swore. Exactly. So looping all the way back to the beginning, when I'm like, man, is it really that serious? And the answer to that is yes. It's probably not shocking to the people on this podcast. Obviously, it's probably not shocking to the people that listen to the podcast, but it really does paint a bigger picture that this is a piece of a larger coordinated attack, because conservative groups do not want children to then become adults that have a sense of identity or a feeling of autonomy, because it is much harder to control and suppress somebody once they have that knowledge and that belief in themselves. So
exactly.
True.
That is.
I do. I know. I sound a bit over the top and dramatic. Well, over the top. I'm sick as hell. But no, I agree completely. It's like not 99.9999% of the time when they're talking about doing things like banning books or banning sex ed and doing this, and the guys are protecting the kids. It is never about protecting the kids. It is the polar opposite of protecting the kids.
Yeah.
Like, it is just great. Like, and like, they've just been going so mask off with it recently. It's like, bro, it's just not, they don't have your interest in mind. They just want to make you a shell of who you are.
Right.
Now I just sound like a hippie. I'll let you finish.
No,
but I stand by it.
I feel very hippie when I talk about this topic because, I do feel very strongly about it. And I feel like I just get so riled up when I'm like, see, I feel like that Always Sunny gif of like all of the things connected, and he's pointing at all the things and like looking crazy almost, because I'm like, it's all connected. It's all stemming from this. And it's, like, sex education is so important because not just because we need to like help people with a public health thing or a relationship thing. It's like this because it's all connected, and so I feel a little bit nuts sometimes when I talk to people who don't really see that or don't get it. I'm so fortunate that so many of my friends, they do get it. They're right there with me. They're the ones pointing at the board too and, drawing connections. So I'm very grateful to be surrounded with like-minded people. But that to say, it's not just an echo chamber. I mean, I encounter a lot of people who think very differently than me, and they're like, well, wait, I'm not understanding why this is all connected. Or, well, shouldn't parents have the right to, control what their kids learn? And it's like, it's a very interesting, multifaceted topic because there are a lot of things to be explored, and there's no one correct answer, but there are a ton of wrong ones.
She's spitting facts, though.
Yeah,
I'm trying to give her validation, but I didn't want to interrupt you.
So obviously I'm very passionate about that, and I could go on forever, but I don't want to do that because I have chores to do. But I wanted to ask for some final closing thoughts from you, Camp and Gurdon, because I know I yapped a lot. So is there anything else that you would like to say about this topic?
I mean, I feel like we're kind of all in agreement, at least like everything you said. I haven't disagreed with a lot of what you said so far. But I do agree that like it is, something that you gotta do with a bit of nuance, because I feel like we all most good people want to do like what's best for all of humanity and everything. And there might be different ideas on how to get there. And I think sexual education, understanding, at least having the vocabulary to interface with it, make sure you're not getting taken advantage of, all that. It's not just important, it's like fundamental,
Absolutely.
Like it's just really important because it helps you understand your bodily autonomy, the rights you have in the current world, the ones that you still have, the ones that are at risk of getting taken away, especially in, historically and also in modern times.
Yes.
It's very important. And I feel like sex ed is kind of like on the vanguard of that, where it's like, if we lose this, we're going to lose more and more and more. And it's just, and I know the comparison, I might cut this line of the podcast. I know the comparison is like a meme, but it is almost kind of like Orwellian-esque the way that things are going, where it's like, the government's like stripping more and more of like the personal freedoms and what you're learning away from you, to the point where it's like, you just do everything in service of your overlords and all the stuff there.
Purposely keeping people uneducated.
Yeah. So you gotta stay educated, be like in the know about not just sex ed, but everything else, how the power structures work. All that stuff is very important. And
Absolutely.
Sex ed is a big part of that, because it's not just about like, engaging in the coitus. It's also a lot of like, like I said, your basic rights, your bodily autonomy, who you are as a person, boundaries, yes, communication. It's all very important. It's very fundamental to the human experience, and you don't want to lose that, because that's what makes you human. That's what makes you a living, breathing, valuable person to yourself and to everyone around you. And you're great, and I love you, and don't be a drone. That's about it.
Well, and it links back to critical thinking. I'm glad you hit on that point a little bit. Of critical thinking is so vital to the concept of sexual education, and really just knowing yourself and knowing your boundaries. But of course, it extends to many other areas as well. And what I encourage people to do is, in the context of sexual education, and also outside of that, just a general idea is question things, figure things out. When somebody says they're going to do something, or like even a real world example of this is when your local politics, are talking about, well, here's this bill or here's this law that we want to pass, asking who's putting this forth. Why are they putting it forth? What does it actually do for our community? And how would it impact myself and those I love? Because if you're asking those questions, yes, it can be difficult because they try to put out misinformation. They try to convince people and persuade people that something is what it really is not. And so as that applies to your everyday life, just be curious. Mm-hmm. I know that can be difficult when you're just trying to survive. And I'm not trying to say that if you're in a moment of, hey, I'm just trying to make it through, I understand that maybe you don't have the mental or emotional bandwidth to be curious and to ask questions. But that's my overarching advice, unsolicited advice. But here you go. Here's a little advice nugget.
I mean, they chose to watch this podcast. I'd say it's
true,
kind of solicited.
They're now over almost an hour and a half into the podcast, and if they're still listening,
yeah, that's true. If I haven't lost all of you yet, my unsolicited advice is ask questions, be curious, question everything, but not to the point of
conspiracy.
Yeah, don't go like full conspiracy.
Yeah, don't go full conspiracy. Mind control in the water. And no,
like don't get to the point where you're starting to like point your curiosity the other way. Like keep it pointed in a way that's beneficial to everyone around you and to yourself, and just like
I agree with all of that. I was just gonna say, sorry, we are a week late. If you can tell, camp is under the weather still.
I was going to make an announcement on the
channel. I'll just do it here for the people that only listen to the audio format or other things. But at the end of we're just sick and dealing with stuff. That was just it. As well as for the stuff that Lexi and Camp, they said literally anything I could have thought of, and then like probably 4 or 5 more examples. So I think we have that covered from my end. But to be a contrarian, No. Yeah, that was me. All right.
Whoa.
I was going to say in the intro, and I forgot to, I was going to be like, as Salt and Peppa famously said, let's talk about sex. And that's what we did here today. And the other thing I want to talk about is our lovely patrons over on Patreon for Gurdon, for camp. We love a good segue. We also love our patrons.
Good job.
So thank you so much for the support. You guys are the reason that we can yap and I can go on my hippie woke soapbox here. So thank you so much. If you like the podcast, please consider giving us thumbs up. Please subscribe to the channel. Follow us on audio formats if that's your thing, as well as always leave us those lovely comments of your thoughts, your opinions, your suggestions. We still take those. I still write them down.
Next fortnight might be a suggestion.
Ooh.
That could be you. That could be
excited.
So thank you so much for all y'all's support. Thank you for listening. Couldn't do this without you. And as Childish Gambino said, and that was it the song Redbone? Stay woke.
Yeah.
All right.
Stay woke.